Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. For 3 days each year, from April 13th to the 15th, Thailand has this really exciting festival called Songkran, also known as the Water Festival. It's all about getting rid of bad luck and welcoming good things. They used to splash water on each other as a way to clean themselves and get blessings, but now it's a giant water fight all over the country. Everyone joins in. The streets are full of things to get each other wet. Buckets, water guns, even hoses. It's crazy fun for everyone, young and old. During Songkran 2024, the streets of Mahasarakan province were really festive and exciting. This province in northeast Thailand, about 400 kilometers from Bangkok, is an important place for religion in the country. Our story is about Pikhit Klipjinda, a 44-year-old man who owned a successful Thai massage spa in Bangkok. His business was doing really well and he made good money. His wife, 37-year-old Wanapa Hamala, was really beautiful. They were in love and had been married for over 10 years. They had 3 children and didn't have to worry about money. On April 13, 2024, the first day of Songkran, Wanapa took the kids to visit her parents in Mahasarakan province and Pikhit stayed in Bangkok to work. Pikhit texted Wanapa and said he missed her and the kids and that he wished he could be with them to celebrate Songkran. She felt bad for him and booked him a flight. She told him to close the spa for 2 days and promised to all go back to Bangkok together after the festival. Pikhit got on the flight to Mahasarakan. That evening, his mother-in-law made a huge delicious meal to welcome him. Everyone made a toast and had a lot of fun until very late. After a few drinks, Pikhit fell asleep in a gazebo in the yard. But something terrible was about to happen. On Tuesday morning, April 16, 2024, the day after Songkran, the excitement of Songkran was over and it was a normal, quiet Tuesday. At 6 a.m., Wanapa's mother woke up and went outside to clean up the yard. She saw her son-in-law, Pikhit, still asleep in the gazebo. Worried that he might get cold, she called out to him, urging him to come inside. But he didn't respond. She had a bad feeling. She went over and shook him gently, and she was horrified to find that his body was stiff. Terrified, she rushed inside and woke Wanapa. Wanapa ran outside. She was shocked to see her husband lying there, not moving at all. She tried desperately to wake him up, but it was no use. Pikhit was dead. He had left her and their 3 young children. In shock, Wanapa immediately called a doctor at a nearby clinic. After examining Pikhit, the doctor told her that he had died sometime during the night. Wanapa was extremely sad. She couldn't understand what had happened. Her husband was very healthy and exercised regularly. Just the night before, he had been laughing and talking with the family. Sad and confused, she felt that something was wrong. Had he drunk too much during the Songkran celebrations? Or was something else going on? Feeling very emotional and confused, Wanapa forced herself to make arrangements for her husband's funeral. 3 days later, Wanapa held a big, expensive funeral for Pikhit. It was a very sad occasion. Family and friends mourned his sudden death, saying how sorry they were for Wanapa, who now had to raise their 3 young children alone. After burying her husband, Wanapa thought she could finally start her life over with her children. She had no idea that what happened next would put her in the middle of a huge scandal. Pikhit's 42-year-old sister, Natprafat, dropped a bombshell. Just over a month later, in mid-May, she held a press conference and flat out said her brother's death wasn't an accident. It was murder. And to make things even more shocking, she blamed her sister-in-law, Wanapa, saying she was involved. Natprafat went on to explain that Pikhit had a life insurance policy worth 16 million baht, almost $500,000, and Wanapa was the only one who'd get the money. Because of this, she asked the insurance company to hold off on paying the money until the police could investigate, and they agreed right away. Of course, the press conference caused a huge stir. Conspiracy theories quickly spread all over the internet, with people accusing Wanapa of everything from insurance fraud to outright murder. With so much public pressure, The police had no choice but to step in. They put together a special team to look into Pichit's death and figure out what was really going on. Pichit, born in 1980 in Bangkok, was 44 years old and the oldest child in his family. He had one younger sister and ran a successful Thai massage spa in the city. He was very health-conscious and managed to look youthful and energetic, even in his 40s. Sociable and outgoing, he loved hanging out with friends and sometimes unwinding with drinks at a bar. When the police spoke to Pichit's sister, Nat Prafat, she said that at first she thought her brother's death was just an accident. But after seeing his body at the funeral, she began to have serious doubts. She noticed that his skin had strange black patches, which reminded her of poisoning. Concerned, she brought it up with Wanapa and suggested they do an autopsy. However, Wanapa quickly shot down the idea, saying they shouldn't disturb the deceased and that Pichit should be left to rest in peace. She didn't waste any time and had him cremated soon after. After the funeral, Nat Prafat's suspicions only grew stronger. She suddenly remembered her brother mentioning a large life insurance policy where Wanapa was the only beneficiary. This made her wonder if her sister-in-law had killed Pichit to get the money. Horrified by the thought, she decided to speak out, hoping the police would investigate and uncover the truth. The police then interviewed the doctor who had examined Pichit's body. The doctor said everything seemed normal at the time and there were no signs of discoloration on his skin. Next, the police questioned the funeral home workers. They also said they didn't notice anything unusual when they first arrived at the scene. Since there were no visible injuries, they assumed the death was due to a sudden illness. However, 3 days later, when they came back to help move the body, they were stunned to see that Pichit's skin had turned black. Although they thought it was strange, they figured it was just a natural change after death and didn't look further into it. The police spoke with relatives and friends who had attended the funeral to gather more information. Some of them mentioned that Wanapa's behavior seemed a bit odd. On the day of the funeral, several people noticed the unusual color of Pichit's skin and suggested that Wanapa hold off on cremation and go for an autopsy instead. But for reasons no one could figure out, she insisted on cremation and ignored their advice. A cremation worker also came forward, telling the police that in all his years of experience, he'd never seen a body burned so completely black. With suspicions piling up, the police started to consider the possibility that Wanapa might have orchestrated her husband's death to get the hefty insurance payout. They decided to bring her in for questioning. Wanapa strongly denied having anything to do with her husband's death or committing insurance fraud. To back up her story, she showed the police text messages between her and Pichit from just 2 days before he died, where he talked about how much he missed her. She explained that's why she had booked him a flight from Bangkok to Maha Sarakam. She also recounted what happened on April 15th. The family was celebrating Songkran, drinking and enjoying the festive atmosphere. Later that night, Pichit, who had had too much to drink, fell asleep in the gazebo. Wanapa said she tried to wake him and get him to come inside, but he insisted on staying outside. She brought him a pillow and blanket, sat with him for a bit, and then went back inside once he was sound asleep. The next morning, she found his body. Wanapa also explained why she didn't want an autopsy, saying it felt too harsh and cruel. As his wife, she was devastated by his death, and no one wanted him back more than she did, especially for their 3 young children. As for his darkened skin, she admitted that she found it strange too, but believed it was due to natural causes. At this point, the police didn't have any solid evidence to prove that Wanapa had intentionally harmed her husband, and because Pichit had been cremated, there was no way to determine the exact cause of his death. With no leads left, the investigation hit a dead end. Pichit's sister, Nat Prafat, appeared on a cremation. The images showed his skin unnaturally black, which immediately raised suspicions. The program also featured a forensic pathologist who examined the photos and gave a startling opinion. Pichit most likely hadn't died of natural causes. The dark discoloration strongly pointed to poisoning, although the exact toxin couldn't be identified. The expert explained that in his decades of work, he had never seen such severe blackening in a case. Nat Prafat also brought out Pichit's death certificate, which was issued by the clinic and listed the cause of death as undetermined. However, The pathologist cautioned that this didn't automatically mean foul play was involved. He explained that local doctors, after finding no obvious injuries, might simply record the cause of death as undetermined without conducting further tests. The TV show made things even worse. News about the possible murder and insurance fraud spread like wildfire. The public quickly turned against Wanapa, labeling her as a heartless and greedy woman. Under growing pressure, Wanapa eventually appeared on the same television show. Dressed in black and wearing a face mask, she looked completely broken. She talked about how devastated she was by her husband's death and how she was struggling to raise their 3 young children alone while dealing with everything on her own. She admitted she was physically and emotionally exhausted. Wanapa said she had hoped that after the funeral, life would calm down so she could grieve in peace. Instead, she was hit with accusations and dragged into a police investigation. Wanapa explained that she hadn't wanted to make a big deal of it, believing the situation would blow over once the police found no evidence against her. But instead, her sister-in-law, Natrafat, had gone public with accusations on TV, which only made things worse. This stirred up even more anger from the public, leading to online harassment and non-stop phone calls. Wanapa described her life as unbearable. She had lost her husband, the one person she leaned on for emotional support, and was now facing relentless public judgment. She said she couldn't stay silent anymore and felt she needed to speak out. Continuing her story, Wanapa shared how she and her husband had always lived in Bangkok, working together at their massage spa. She said she loved him deeply and they had a strong bond. While he was generally healthy, he did have a drinking habit. Sometimes, when he drank too much, he'd raise his voice and they'd argue about it. But these were never serious fights. They always made up quickly. Earlier in April, though, he went out drinking at a bar without telling her, coming home late and stumbling drunk. Worried about his health, she confronted him and they got into a heated argument. In the heat of the moment, she decided to take the kids and stay at a hotel. With Songkran approaching, she took the kids to her parents' home in Maha. Even though they were apart, she and Pickett stayed in touch through text messages. Then, on April 15th, Pickett joined them in Maha. But that evening, he drank heavily again. Tragically, he passed away the next day. Wanapa believed that his long-term drinking had taken a toll on his health and likely led to his sudden death. She explained that the cremation 3 days later was simply following local customs, not an attempt to hide anything. As for why his skin turned black, she said she had no idea but insisted she had nothing to hide. Wanapa went on to say that her sister-in-law, Nat Prafat, had barely been in touch with her for years, almost disappearing from their lives. But now, with her brother gone, she had suddenly reappeared, throwing out accusations with no proof. Wanapa suspected that Pickett had mentioned the life insurance policy to Nat Prafat, and now, out of greed, she was trying to get a share of the money. She also pointed out that Nat Prafat didn't have a steady job, struggled with money, and often secretly asked her parents for financial help. On the program, Wanapa even shared text messages from Nat Prafat to their parents, asking for money over and over under different excuses. Wanapa argued that it wasn't hard to believe her sister-in-law would resort to making false accusations just to get some cash. By the end of Wanapa's emotional testimony, public opinion had shifted. People started seeing Nat Prafat as the greedy one, willing to frame an innocent woman just to get money. Just as the live broadcast was about to wrap up, the producers got a mysterious phone call. The caller, who introduced herself as one of Pickett's close friends and a devout Buddhist, shared a chilling detail. Just 8 days before his death, Pickett had been attacked by 2 men in Bangkok and barely escaped with his life. He had confided in her about the terrifying ordeal. According to the friend, on the evening of April 8th, Pickett was working late at his massage spa when he got a text from his wife. She told him she had made reservations at an upscale restaurant in Bangkok and invited him to dinner. At the time, they were separated, with Wanapa and the kids staying at a hotel. Thinking this was her way of making up, Pickett was thrilled. He closed the spa early and headed to the restaurant, excited about the chance to patch things up. When he got there, Wanapa hadn't arrived yet, so he ordered a bottle of fancy wine, hoping to share it with her. But she never showed. When he texted her, she suddenly changed her mind, saying she didn't want to eat there anymore, and told him to go home. Disappointed, Pickett canceled the wine order and drove back home. While he was driving on the Romantra Expressway, a motorcycle sped past his car out of nowhere. There were 2 men on it, and the guy riding in the back suddenly fired 4 shots at him. Thankfully, Pickett reacted quickly, and since his car windows were up, he managed to get away unharmed. Shaken and scared that he might be a target of gangsters or someone out for revenge, Pickett confided in his friend. She immediately grew suspicious, and even suggested that Wanapa might have had something to do with the attack. But Pickett waved it off, saying there was no way his wife would ever do something like that. Despite their occasional arguments, he insisted their relationship was strong. Seeing how sure he was, his friend decided not to push the topic any further. After the attack, Pickett didn't report it to the police. Since he wasn't hurt, he thought it would be better not to stir things up. But the people around him noticed he wasn't himself anymore. He became withdrawn, spending hours alone, lost in thought, and looking completely drained. During one visit, his friend found him sitting alone, giggling softly to himself before suddenly bursting into tears. She thought his strange behavior might have a blessings and prayers to ward off evil spirits. But even after that, Pickett still seemed fragile and confused. She believed his odd behavior was tied to the April 8th attack, most likely because of the shock and trauma. When she asked him if he could remember the attackers' faces, he said the gunman looked a lot like one of his wife's friends. But since it was dark, he couldn't be sure. This only deepened her suspicions, and she started wondering if there was more to the story than Pickett was letting on. The friend's revelation left the studio audience stunned. The idea that the gunman might have known Wanapa immediately put her in the spotlight, and she looked noticeably tense. The friend then said that while she didn't know the gunman personally, she did know his name. Just as she was about to reveal it, the host quickly interrupted, warning that sharing such sensitive information could interfere with the police investigation. After the broadcast, the shocking twist reignited public interest in the case. Wanapa's attempt to clear her name completely backfired. The friend's phone call only added more fuel to the fire, making Wanapa seem even more suspicious. The police followed up by interviewing the friend who told them the gunman's name was Siri Rongrong, a person she claimed she had never met. While confirming that Pickett had been attacked, the friend admitted she couldn't be sure if it was connected to his death. However, she brought up another detail. Pickett had been infatuated with a bar worker named Suchata and would often visit the bar just to see her. The friend even suspected that Suchata might have cast a spell on Pickett, which caused his mental instability. She believed that not even temple blessings could undo the damage and that it ultimately led to his death. The police found the friend's belief in witchcraft a bit hard to take seriously and treated her claims with caution. Even so, they decided to look into it and interviewed the bar worker Suchata. She admitted she knew Pickett, describing him as a casual drinking buddy with shared interests. She also mentioned they had met at the bar on April 14th, the night before he flew to Mahasarakam. According to her, Pickett seemed unusually down that night and made some cryptic remarks. He had talked about not wanting to go to Mahasarakam, saying he had a bad feeling that something terrible was going to happen. He even told her to take care of herself, hinting they might not see each other again. Suchata's account painted a very different picture from Wanapa's story. According to her, Pickett had been deeply reluctant to go to Mahasarakam, almost as if he knew he was walking into danger. This raised new questions. Had Wanapa been lying? The police started to consider a bold theory. Maybe Wanapa had planned her husband's death and used the text messages to create a false impression of a loving reunion. While the text did show that Pickett missed his family, it was possible Wanapa had manipulated him into saying those things to cover her tracks. Adding to this theory was the possibility that the motorcycle attackers were connected to Wanapa. Maybe, for reasons still unclear, she had conspired with someone to kill her husband, and when the first attempt failed, she lured him to Mahasarakam under the pretense of a family reunion. If the police could track down the 2 men on the motorcycle, they might finally uncover the truth and prove their theory. The police pulled CCTV footage from the Bangkok restaurant and Pichett's route home on the night of April 8th. At 10:49 p.m., a camera outside the restaurant caught Pickett arriving alone, wearing a black t-shirt, shorts, and sneakers. A waiter greeted him at the door. Meanwhile, another camera angle showed two men on a motorcycle parked across the street, watching Pickett closely. The passenger kept checking his phone as if he were texting someone. A few minutes later, they rode off to a nearby bush, where the passenger grabbed a bag before speeding away. At 11:22 p.m., the restaurant camera showed Pickett leaving. Just a minute later, a gas station camera recorded the same two men refueling their motorcycle. Then, 11 minutes later, CCTV footage from the Rementra Expressway captured the attack. Pickett was driving a black car when the motorcycle suddenly pulled up beside him, and the passenger fired 4 shots before the pair sped off. Another camera at a nearby intersection caught them escaping at 11:36 p.m. The driver was wearing a helmet, but the passenger wasn't. When the police examined Pickett's black car, parked in the basement of his Bangkok home, they found bullet holes near the driver's seat, confirming the attackers had intended to kill him. But something didn't add up. If the two men had been watching Pickett outside the restaurant, why didn't they attack him there? The police started suspecting there might have been accomplices, hinting at a more complicated plot than they'd initially thought. As the case drew more attention, the media jumped in with their own investigations. One reporter uncovered that Pickett regularly used muscle, building drugs and hormones to maintain his physique. Experts speculated that prolonged use of these substances, combined with his heavy drinking, might have caused serious health issues, possibly leading to a sudden death. Meanwhile, others turned to a spiritual angle. Some consulted a well-known spiritual advisor about the photos of Pickett's blackened body. The advisor claimed Pickett had been cursed, and that the blackening was caused by powerful black magic poisoning. According to them, this type of curse could even control the time of death, making it impossible to detect through forensic science. With these wild theories in play, the case spiraled into a storm of conspiracy theories and superstitious fear, leaving the public unsure of what to believe. Realizing the case was getting more and more complicated, the police knew they had to get to the bottom of it. Just as they felt like they were stuck, Nate Profat brought Pickett's close friend, the one who had called into the TV program, to the police station. The friend told them she had been receiving threatening phone calls and felt like someone was following her. The police asked her to explain what was going on. She said that a strange man had been calling her over and over, asking about the progress of Pickett's case. When she tried to find out who he was, he refused to answer and started yelling at her instead. Terrified, she turned to Nate Profat for help. Recognizing that this could be connected to her brother's case, Nate Profat immediately brought her to the police. Nate Profat was convinced Wanapa was behind the harassment. She thought Wanapa was desperate to find out how the investigation was going and had hired someone to dig for information, using threats to intimidate the friend. Maybe, Nate Profat speculated, this was Wanapa's way of retaliating for the public accusations against her. Even though both women strongly suspected Wanapa, they didn't have solid proof. They asked the police for protection while the investigation continued, and the police agreed to keep them safe. 2 months after Pickett's death, the police made a shocking move. They arrested Wanapa as the prime suspect. She fiercely denied having anything to do with it and accused the police of wrongfully targeting her. Wanapa, born in 1987 in Mahasarakam, was 37 years old. Her father had passed away when she was still a child, leaving her mother to raise her on her own. As an adult, Wanapa moved to Bangkok, where she met Pickett. The two fell in love and eventually got married. They had 3 children together. Pickett's massage spa became a huge success and his career thrived. Wanapa left her previous job to help him run the business. Thanks to their hard work, they were able to buy a house and a car in Bangkok, living a comfortable and happy life. To outsiders, Wanapa seemed to have it all: a loving husband, 3 beautiful kids, and a successful career. It was hard to imagine someone like her committing such a crime. However, before the police arrested Wanapa, they made sure to gather solid evidence. By following leads from the night of the attack, they managed to identify the 2 men on the motorcycle: 25-year-old Sukanta, who was driving, and 25-year-old Sirangrang, who fired the shots. The police tracked down Sukanta at a boarding house and arrested him. During questioning, he confessed to being involved, but claimed he was just a hired hand and didn't even know Pikhit. Sukanta explained that on April 8th, a man named Suwon contacted him with a job offer. Suwon offered him 4,000 baht, about $120, to tail someone with a guy named Sirarongrang joining him to help. Thinking it was just a basic surveillance gig, Sukanta agreed. That evening, he picked up Sirarongrang and the two waited outside the restaurant as instructed. It wasn't until Sirarongrang pulled a gun out of the bushes that Sukanta realized this was no ordinary job. Scared out of his mind, he wanted to quit, but Sirarongrang threatened him, leaving him no choice but to go along with it. After the attack, Sirarongrang disappeared and never contacted him again. Using Sukanta's confession, the police arrested Suwon, the man who had hired him. Suwon didn't try to deny it. He admitted he was just a middleman tasked with finding hitmen. He told the police that Wanapa had reached out to him, offering a total of 300,000 baht, about $9,000, to have her husband killed. The money was too good to pass up. After pocketing the cash, Suwon hired Sukanta for 4,000 baht to assist Sirarongrang, the actual shooter. Suwon also said he gave Sirarongrang 45,000 baht, around $1,350, but claimed he didn't know anything about what happened after that. Meanwhile, after her arrest, Wanapa refused to talk and denied everything. But the police had found damning evidence on her phone, call logs, and bank transfer records directly linking her to Suwon. These matched Suwon's story perfectly. Faced with all the evidence, Wanapa finally broke down and confessed. She admitted that her marriage had been falling apart for a while. After they became wealthy, Pikhit started having affairs with women he met at bars. Whenever she confronted him, he would promise to change, but never did, leaving her feeling frustrated and hopeless. On top of that, he often lashed out at her when he was drunk, taking his anger out on her. Over time, her resentment grew stronger until she finally decided she wanted him gone for good. About a month before the incident, Wanapa discovered yet another affair, which led to a furious argument. She took their 3 kids and left. That's when she came up with her plan. In late March, she reached out to Sirarongrang online, and they met in Bangkok on April 1st to work out the details. After that, she contacted Suwon also online for help, and he brought in Sukanta. Wanapa even bought the gun herself and hid it in the bushes across from the restaurant where she planned to meet her husband, a precaution to avoid leaving any trace. She thought her plan was flawless, but miraculously, Pikhit survived the attack. Afraid he might start suspecting her, Wanapa decided to take the kids to her parents' home. To her surprise, not only did Pikhit not report the attack, but he also told her he wanted to celebrate Songkran with her and the kids. Wanapa later confessed to the police that after the failed attempt, she felt both relieved and guilty that the bullets had missed. She said that if he had died that night, she would have been haunted by the guilt forever. But then, unexpectedly, he died suddenly the day after arriving at her parents' house. The police, however, weren't convinced by Wanapa's story. They suspected she had made a second attempt to kill her husband after the first plan failed. They pushed her for more details, but she only admitted to hiring the hitmen and refused to any more questions. With the investigation at a standstill, the police had no choice but to keep digging for more evidence. That's when Nat Prafat stepped in again, giving the police Pichit's ashes in the hopes that forensic testing might reveal something. Around the same time, a local resident in Mahasarakam came forward with a lead. They suggested that Pikhit might have ingested a Darius elliptica, also known as tuba root. This plant has feathery leaves, and its roots give off a strong fishy smell, which becomes even more intense when crushed. Traditionally, fishermen used tuba root to stun fish. They would soak the roots in water to release the toxins and pour the mixture into rivers or streams. The toxins would make the fish sluggish and easy to catch. Over time, this method fell out of practice, so the plant isn't widely known anymore. While fish caught were still safe to eat, ingesting the plant directly is lethal to humans. It causes poisoning and leaves a telltale sign, blackened skin after death. But confirming whether Pikhit had been poisoned with Darius elliptica would require forensic testing of his remains. Meanwhile, Sirarongrang, the shooter, was still on the run and hadn't been caught. With so many unanswered questions, the case remained open, and proving Wanapa's involvement in poisoning her husband was a massive challenge. Still, there's hope that one day the full truth will come to light. Story 2. On a cold night on the outskirts of Hamilton, on February 28, 2021, a driver was going down an empty road when he saw something moving in the bushes. At first he thought it was just an animal that was hurt, but then his headlights shone on the scene and he saw something terrible. A blonde woman covered in blood. She stumbled onto the road and collapsed. The driver slammed on his brakes and rushed over to help her. Her eyes were vacant and she could barely speak. Her dark coat was covered in blood. The driver panicked and decided not to wait for an ambulance. Instead, he drove her to the nearest hospital. There, the doctors found out she had been shot 3 times and one of the bullets was really close to her heart. It was a miracle she was still alive. The police were called right away and they went to an empty warehouse nearby. They found a man lying there at the entrance of the warehouse. There were footprints and evidence everywhere, and the police started to get an idea of the terrible things that happened. They quickly identified 2 suspects, a man and a woman, and their pasts became important to the investigation. Who were they and what truly happened that night? The police looked at the crime scene and found a plane ticket from Vancouver to Toronto. It belonged to 39-year-old Tyler Pratt, the guy who was killed. They started looking into his past and found out he had been involved in a lot of crimes. He was involved in drug dealing, car theft, and even human smuggling. Tyler, or Old T as he was known on the streets, had a lot of connections with different gangs. The blonde woman who survived, the police called her Blondie, was 26-year-old Jordan Romano, Tyler's girlfriend. She also had a lot of problems with the law, like drunk driving and assault. Then the police found out that Old T and Blondie were building their own criminal business in Canada. Old T wasn't just a smuggler. He also took advantage of young women from Eastern and Southern Europe and forced them to do illegal things. He took most of the money they made. There weren't any security cameras at the crime scene, but the tire tracks in the snow helped the police. The attackers drove back and forth a few times, looking for Blondie while she was trying to escape. She was really strong and crawled over 100 meters through the deep snow to find help. She survived, but sadly, she lost her baby. The attack was brutal, like something out of a Tarantino movie. The attackers thought they were so smart, but they left evidence everywhere. Now it was up to the police to figure out who these people were and put all the clues together to catch them. So the police looked at the boarding pass and figured out that Old T and Blondie landed in Toronto on the same day as the attack. They thought that maybe the attackers met up with them at the warehouse and attacked them when they had the chance. But when they looked at the crime scene, they couldn't find any clues about who the attackers were. The police searched the warehouse really carefully. It was mostly empty, but there was a big dent in one of the metal walls. They wondered if maybe a car crashed into the building when the attackers were trying to get away. If that was true, the car would probably be really damaged. So the police started searching parking lots and repair shops within 100 kilometers. And guess what? They found a white Range Rover at a train station with a really messed up passenger door that wouldn't close. They looked up the license plate and found out that the car belonged to a rental company. Then they found out that Old T had rented the Range Rover right before the attack. It seemed like the attackers used the rental car to get away and just left it there. All messed up. While the police were getting evidence from the Range Rover, a tow truck showed up with 2 guys who were going to take the car away. They said that the Range Rover had been sold to a used car dealership. This made the police even more suspicious. The police talked to the owner of the dealership, and he quickly admitted that the guy who sold him the car originally wanted 4,000 Canadian dollars for it. But then the guy texted him and said the car had a damaged door and was hot, which means it was probably stolen or used in a crime. The dealer was worried, so he offered 2,000 Canadian dollars instead. Even though the dealer was used to doing shady deals, he freaked out when he found out the Range Rover might be connected to a violent crime. He agreed to help the police and said he had never actually met the guy who sold him the car. He also told them something else. The seller had traded in an Audi Q5 and he said he left it in Muskoka, a town over 200 kilometers north of Toronto. The police immediately went to Muskoka and found the Audi in a parking lot. They found a package in a nearby dumpster with important evidence inside, clothes that looked like they had blood on them, and a box of 9mm bullets. This was a big help in figuring out what happened. The police kept digging into the case. They did some tests and found out that the blood on the sweatpants in the dumpster belonged to both Blondie and Old T. A worker at a convenience store near the warehouse said that a group of young people came into the store on the day of the attack. There was a really handsome white guy and an Asian woman with them. They bought food and drinks and paid with cash. The worker remembered that the guy seemed really nervous and kept telling the woman to hurry up. But here's the thing. When they left the store, they weren't driving the Audi Q5. They got into a Mercedes and took off. The police found out who owned the Audi. It belonged to an old lady, but when they went to her house, they found out that her son had stolen the car 2 days earlier and sold it. His mom and the police pressured him, and he finally told them that he sold it to a guy named Oliver Carafa. The police knew that name. Oliver had been in trouble with the law before for things like theft and fraud. And when he was 19, he was in a really bad accident. He was speeding in downtown Toronto and crashed his car into a pole, and the person in the car with him died. It turned out that Oliver was drunk and didn't even have a real driver's license. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison and couldn't drive for 15 years. Because he couldn't drive, Oliver had his wife, Yoon Lucy Mung Lee, pick up the Audi Q5 on February 28th, the same day as the attack. Now, the police thought they were the ones who did it. Things were starting to make sense. Old T was dead and Blondie was hurt really badly and lost her baby. They knew that the Range Rover that Old T rented and the Audi Q5 that Oliver and Lucy bought were involved in the crime. The police were getting closer to catching them, and their investigation led them to a fancy apartment in downtown Toronto. The fancy apartment the police were checking out was empty. There was no sign of Oliver or Lucy, and the cars in the garage weren't the ones they were looking for. So, the detectives immediately looked at the security footage. On the night of the attack, the recordings showed the couple leaving the apartment around 10 p.m. and coming back at 2 a.m., but they didn't stay long. Soon after, they left again, and this time Oliver was carrying a black garbage bag, just like the one with the bloody clothes and bullets in it. This made the police even more sure that they were the ones who did it. The police thought that, after the attack, Oliver and Lucy went back to their apartment to get their stuff and get rid of evidence before taking off. They also found out something about their money situation. All of Oliver's stuff, like his house and cars, was in Lucy's name. Even the phone he used was under her account, so it seemed like he was totally dependent on his wife for money. The next question was, where did they go? The police used their cell phone data to find them and figured out they were at another apartment in downtown Toronto. But when the police got there, they didn't find Oliver and Lucy. Instead, they found this big guy who seemed pretty relaxed. The guy said he was a chef at a restaurant nearby where Oliver used to work. He said that on the day of the attack, Oliver and Lucy came to him and said they needed to use his phone for a business deal. They didn't want the police to track them, so they asked him to switch SIM cards with them for the night. The chef thought something was fishy, but before he could say no, Lucy gave him 5 $100 bills and said they would rent his phone for the night. The chef didn't really want to, but he agreed because of the money. At the time, when the chef was asked to hold onto the phone and respond to messages, he had no idea he was unwittingly becoming a pawn in Oliver and Lucy's elaborate scheme. The couple hadn't just fled Toronto. They had orchestrated a plan to mislead the police by creating a false alibi using the chef's phone signal. Everything seemed to be going smoothly for Oliver and Lucy, but the following morning, instead of receiving a message from the couple as promised, the chef was greeted by police officers at his door. Investigators quickly realized that Oliver and Lucy had meticulously planned every step to evade capture. However, their cunning plan backfired, further implicating them in the attack on Old T and Blondie. Following the trail of evidence, police discovered the couple had fled Canada on a flight to Europe from Montreal's airport. Just 1 day after the incident, news of their international manhunt quickly spread, capturing widespread media attention. The story captivated the public, not only due to the nature of the crime, but also because of Oliver and Lucy's striking appearances, turning them into instant tabloid fodder. Oliver, tall and chiseled, had worked as a fashion model, further fueling public fascination. Crowds of admirers had even gathered outside the courthouse during his 2014 trial for the fatal car accident. Lucy was equally glamorous. With a captivating online presence and a thriving Instagram career, she frequently posted about fashion and lifestyle, amassing a substantial following. Along with her two triplet sisters, she and her family were often referred to as the Kardashians of the Chinese community. This raised a compelling question for the public. Were Oliver and Lucy truly living the high life they portrayed online? Or were they merely imitating a glamorous facade, their real lives steeped in a far darker reality? Lucy and her family moved to Canada when she was young. At first, they didn't have much money and had to rely on her dad's job as a driving instructor to get by. But Lucy's mom, Liao Ziwei, was a really smart businesswoman. She started out selling insurance, then got into investments, and within 10 years, she had built a huge financial company. She became a really important person in Toronto's Chinese community. As they got richer, the family started living a more luxurious life. They had these fancy charity events every year, and even the Premier of Ontario and the Prime Minister of Canada came to them. Liao Ziwei also became a leader in different Chinese community associations and helped raise money for different causes. This made her even more important in the business world and gave her a lot of influence in politics. In Canada, people don't usually pay much attention to community associations and business clubs. They think the people in those groups don't have much power, but in this case, it turned out that Liao Ziwei was a big deal in these organizations. She invested a lot in her triplet daughters and even started an organization called the Canadian Youth Foundation when they were only 13 years old. She said it was to help with education and business ideas. In Toronto, the triplets were known for being beautiful, but their mom also helped them become famous by getting them into all sorts of events, like beauty pageants. But even though they were in the spotlight, they weren't very successful in the pageants. Only Caitlin Lee, the second daughter, did well and even placed in the Miss World Canada competition in 2020. Their family, with their fancy events and luxurious lifestyle, was like a Toronto Kardashian dynasty where fame, influence, and beauty were everything. In high school, Lucy was really shy and not popular at all. She was totally different from the rich woman she would become later. Oliver, on the other hand, was the most popular guy in school. He was good-looking and athletic, and all the girls had a crush on him. But when they met again years later, things had changed. Lucy, who used to wear glasses and braces, was now a beautiful and successful woman. But Oliver had a criminal record and a bad reputation. He wasn't the same guy he used to be and was just trying to remember the good old days. When they met again, they fell in love. Oliver really liked Lucy, and she fell for him hard. But her family didn't like him at all. They thought he was a bad guy because he didn't have a job, had been in trouble with the law, and his family didn't have much money. They were really rich, so they didn't want her to be with him. But Lucy was in love and didn't care what her family thought. She stopped talking to them, quit school, and even started selling N.UD photos online to help Oliver. Eventually, her family gave in, but they said that Lucy had 1 year to help Oliver get a job and make something of himself. If she couldn't do it, they would have to break up. Her parents didn't think Oliver would ever be successful, and they thought Lucy would eventually realize that. But then the pandemic happened, and Lucy's mom got stuck in China. Lucy was alone and had to deal with her relationship with Oliver by herself. With Lucy's mom out of the picture, Lucy and Oliver started partying and spending a ton of money. They even forged her mom's signature and used her company's money to buy all kinds of crazy stuff. They even grew hallucinogenic plants on one of her properties. But even though he was living the high life, Oliver still wanted to impress Lucy's family. He felt like he had to prove himself. Unfortunately, he got involved in some shady business deals like smuggling illegal stuff and helping thieves. But he wasn't making money fast enough. Then he met Old T, who was known for being a risk-taker and making a lot of money quickly. Old T had a crazy plan. They would use Lucy's mom's company to trick young women from Southern and Eastern Europe into coming to Canada. Then they would force them into prostitution. Lucy usually did whatever Oliver wanted, but she didn't like this plan. She was worried that it would cause problems and that her mom would find out. Plus, she didn't want Oliver involved with sex workers. Lucy was a smart woman, and she suggested a different plan. Because of the pandemic, everyone needed face masks, protective gear, and safety goggles. She knew people in China who could make these things cheaply, and they could sell them in Europe for a lot of money. Old T thought it was a good idea and invested 500,000 Canadian dollars. Lucy and Oliver would handle everything and split the profits 80-20 THS. But things didn't go as planned. They had problems from the start. The factories couldn't make enough stuff, the prices went way up, and they didn't have the right paperwork to send the stuff to Europe. The stuff even got damaged on the way there. After months of struggling, they finally got their stuff to Europe, but it was such bad quality that they couldn't sell it. They lost all the money, including Old T's investment. This taught them a lesson about getting involved in risky business deals. When Old T realized he had lost a ton of money, he told Oliver and Lucy they had to pay him back the 500,000 Canadian dollars. He was really mad and threatened to get them involved in his criminal stuff if they didn't give him the money in a month. Oliver freaked out and begged Lucy to figure something out, so he asked her to marry him. Lucy was so happy that she said yes right away. They got a marriage license and eloped. They didn't even have a wedding or tell their families or friends. It wasn't until the police were looking for them that their families found out they were married. Now, Lucy and Oliver were like Bonnie and Clyde, and they were in this together. Even though Lucy came from a rich family, they still had to pay back the $500,000, and it was stressing them out. They couldn't just take that much money from her mom's company. Lucy had learned some things about insurance from watching her mom, and she came up with a plan. They would use insurance to avoid paying taxes and to invest. She told Old T that there was this special kind of life insurance where you could also invest and make money. It wasn't your average life insurance. It also gave you money every year. She said that she could trick the insurance company and get Old T a $6 million policy, even though he could only get $1.5 million normally. She promised that he would make a lot of money after a year. However, beneath this veneer of financial opportunity, Lucy later confessed to police that her true motive for pushing Old T towards insurance was to buy herself and Oliver time to escape. By the time Old T realized the insurance policy was fabricated and there would be no dividends, they would likely be long gone, safely tucked away in Europe. Old T considered the offer, weighing it against the precarious nature of his life in the criminal underworld. He knew if he won in his line of work, he could end up in jail. If he lost, he risked disability and the potential loss of everything. Investing in insurance, as Lucy advised, might offer a semblance of security for himself and his unborn child. Old T still trusted Oliver and Lucy, so he and his pregnant girlfriend flew to Toronto to get the insurance paperwork done. But once they got the check, Oliver and Lucy changed their tune. They said that the insurance money and the debt were different things. Old T could keep the insurance money, but they still had to pay him back within 2 weeks, or he would come after them. Oliver was freaking out and wanted to ask his mother-in-law for help, but Lucy's sister told them that their mom had found out about the plants they were growing on her property. She was furious and even booked a flight to come yell at them. They were trapped. Old T wanted his money, and their family was going to be really mad at them. They didn't know what to do, so they came up with a crazy plan. Kill Old T and run away to Europe, where Oliver was from. They figured that debts don't matter if you're dead. Oliver called Old T and said he found a great warehouse to grow their plants. He didn't need Old T's money, just his connections to help run things and make sure everything went smoothly. They would split the profits 50-50 THS once they sold the stuff. Old T still trusted Oliver and Lucy, so he agreed to check out the warehouse and talk about their plans. He had no idea it was a trap. Blondie, Old T's girlfriend and the only one who survived the attack, later told the police what happened that night. She and Old T rented a car and drove to the warehouse. It was dark, and they got lost for a bit, but they finally found Oliver and Lucy waiting for them. The two men went to talk about business, and Blondie stayed in the car with Lucy. A few minutes later, she saw Oliver walking back alone. He waved to Lucy, and Lucy got out of the car. She didn't know what was about to happen. Blondie rolled down her window to talk to them, and then she saw Oliver pull out a gun and shoot her. The gunshot echoed through the night, prompting Old T to rush from the other side of the warehouse to investigate. But he was too late. Oliver gunned him down. To ensure Old T was dead, Oliver coldly approached his lifeless body and fired another shot, a chilling display of ruthlessness. After the attack, the police figured out what happened. Blondie was hurt really badly, but was still alive. She had crawled through the snow to get help, which showed how strong she was. Meanwhile, Oliver and Lucy were trying to get away. They went to Europe and used burner phones and SIM cards to trick the police. They even got rid of the two cars hundreds of kilometers apart to make it harder for the police to find them. But they didn't realize two things. The police in Hungary were really good at their jobs, and Blondie was a tough woman who had helped put them in jail. Court documents showed that after leaving Canada, they flew to Prague and hid there for a few months. Then they went to Budapest, hoping to stay with Oliver's uncle. But they were out of luck. When they got to the airport in Budapest, the facial recognition technology caught them and they were arrested. Lucy's lawyer later said that while they were in jail, Oliver sent messages to Lucy through other people, telling her to fight going back to Canada. He thought that maybe he could bribe the courts in Eastern Europe, but not in Canada. But Lucy, who was used to a comfortable life, couldn't handle the women's prison in Budapest. She wanted to go back to Toronto for a trial. Her mom was worried and hired a really good lawyer for her. She even got a private jet to bring her daughter back from Hungary. When they landed in Canada, her rich family paid $2.7 million CAD so she could get out of jail and wait for her trial at home. But they didn't do the same for Oliver. They didn't think he deserved their help, so he got a public defender. Lucy's family paid a lot of money to get a top lawyer who tried to separate the two cases. They wanted to make it look like Oliver was the only one who shot anyone, and Lucy just helped a little. But the court didn't believe that. It was clear that Lucy was involved in the whole thing, from the attack to the escape. They were both responsible and were charged with first-degree murder. In the courtroom, with the bright lights shining down, they talked about what happened that cold February night. Because they were both involved in the same crime, the court decided to combine Oliver and Lucy's trials. The jury would decide if they were guilty. Oliver and Lucy had a choice to make. Would they stick together, or would one of them blame the other one to try to get a better sentence? In this tense situation, they turned on each other. Can you believe it? Oliver's lawyer said that it was all Lucy's fault because she spent so much money, and that's why he partnered with Old T. And he said that it was Lucy's idea to kill Old T so they wouldn't have to pay him back. She said that he had a lot of enemies, and if they cleaned up the crime scene well, the police wouldn't be able to find them. But Lucy's lawyer said she didn't know about Oliver's plan at all. She said she was just the driver doing what Oliver told her to do, and that after the shooting, she was in shock and just did what he said. Oliver said that he was just defending himself and that Old T threatened him and Lucy making him do it. Lucy's lawyer said she wasn't smart enough to plan something like that and that she was too naive to do it. Then, Blondie, who'd been through so much, had to testify in court. According to the Hamilton Spectator, the bullet that killed her baby also made her unconscious for 3 days. But she still remembered everything that happened before the shooting. Blondie said that Lucy wouldn't let her go check on Old T while Oliver, who had a gun, came towards them. She also said she heard a loud crash, probably the car hitting the warehouse wall. And she said that Oliver and Lucy argued. Oliver thought Blondie was dead, but Lucy said they needed to find her and kill her. Blondie's testimony made Lucy seem cold and heartless. She didn't even care that Blondie was pregnant. Lucy's lawyer tried to discredit Blondie and said she was lying to get back at them. But the jury didn't believe her. Blondie almost died. In the end, the jury said that both Lucy and Oliver were guilty of first-degree murder. They were sentenced to life in prison, and they couldn't get out of jail early for 25 years. They tried to escape, but they ended up in the same place they started, behind bars. Even if they ever got out of jail, they would be old by then. They had wasted their youth. It's ironic that Lucy had a perfect life, a rich family, a charming personality, and a bright future. But she messed it all up, and now she was in prison. Story 3. This crime story shocked all of America. A pregnant mom and her 2 young daughters disappeared, so there was a huge search, but they couldn't find them. Just when the case seemed stuck, one small thing revealed a terrible truth. The judge in charge of the case said, "I've worked on over 1,000 cases, and I've never seen anything like this. This might be the most terrible crime I've ever seen." So what happened? Let's go back to 2018 and look at this shocking American tragedy. Frederick, Colorado was a typical American town. It started as a coal mining town where workers and their families lived. But when the mines closed in 1928, the town had a tough time and only recently started getting better. According to the 2020 census, the town had a population of 14,513, a 67.22% jump from 2010. And this quiet town gained unwanted notoriety thanks to the story we're about to tell. Our story is about Sean and Catherine Watts. She had a husband who seemed devoted, 2 cute daughters, a good job, and a perfect family life, the kind that made everyone jealous. Early in the morning on August 13, 2018, Sean Ann, who was 15 weeks pregnant, came home from a business trip. Her friend dropped her off and said she would pick Sean Ann up later that morning to go to the doctor. But the next day, Sean Ann was gone. She wasn't answering texts or calls and even missed her doctor's appointment, which was not like her. By 12:10 p.m., Nicole couldn't wait anymore. She drove to Shanann's house with her son to check on her friend. Sean Ann lived at 2825 Saratoga Trail in a big house with 5 bedrooms. When Nicole got to the house, it was a hot day, and she saw Shanann's car in the driveway. If Sean Ann was home, she couldn't have gone far. But something was wrong. The doors and windows were closed and locked. Nicole knocked and called Shanann's name, but no one answered. She checked the doors and windows again, but no one broke in. Looking through the windows, she couldn't see Sean Ann or the kids. This is where things got weird. Nicole felt uneasy and called Chris right away to ask if he knew where his wife and kids were. Christopher Lee Watts, Shanann's husband, worked at Anadarko Petroleum and worked long hours. He said he had no idea and said that when he left for work a little after 5 a.m., his wife and kids were still asleep. When he heard that Sean Ann was missing, Chris said he would go home right away. While waiting for him, Nicole called the police. At 1:40 p.m., a police officer arrived to investigate, and just then, Chris pulled into the driveway. He let them into the house, and it was really quiet inside. The doors and windows were fine, and there was no sign that anyone broke in or that there had been a fight. The house looked normal except for one weird thing. The bedsheets were missing from the master bed. Chris said that Sean Ann took the kids to a friend's house and that they'd probably be back soon. But when they looked closer, they saw that Shanann's purse, cell phone, and even her medicine were all still in the house. This was a big problem. Who leaves the house without their purse or phone nowadays? Especially Sean Ann, who worked for a nutritional supplement company and was always talking to clients. Unless it was an emergency, she was always on her phone. "Did your wife say anything to you this morning before you left for work?" they asked. "She got home around 2 a.m., Chris explained. "I was asleep, but I woke up around 4 a.m. We needed to talk about separating. We had a normal conversation, and we've been having some problems lately. We haven't been happy. She said she was going to a friend's house to calm down, but she didn't say which friend. I left for work around 5:30 a.m. I tried calling her later, but she didn't answer. I thought she was still upset, so I didn't worry about it. I don't know what happened after that." Chris's story seemed to make sense. Maybe they had a fight, and Sean Ann went to a friend's house to calm down and forgot her phone. It all seemed believable. The police wanted to see when Sean Ann might have left, so they started looking at security camera footage from nearby streets and neighbors' houses. However, none of the cameras showed Sean Ann or the kids leaving the house. The only thing they saw was Chris putting his truck in the garage at 5:27 a.m. and then leaving for work at 5:45 a.m. That was all. It was like Sean Ann and the girls had disappeared. They never left the house. The police asked people in the neighborhood if they had seen the family, but no one had. As night fell, the first day of the search ended with no results. Word of Sean Ann and her daughter's disappearance spread quickly through Frederick. The community was nervous, and fear came to the quiet town as people started gossiping. To stop everyone from panicking, the FBI and the CBI joined the local police the next day. Dozens of officers and K-9 units went to Chris's house and searched everywhere, but they couldn't find Sean Ann or the girls. Chris cooperated with the police and even did a TV interview. Meanwhile, In front of the cameras, tears were in Chris's eyes as he described what was happening. "I've never experienced anything like this," he said, and his voice was shaking. "It's like a bad dream I can't wake up from." He really wanted his family back and imagined his daughters running to hug him. "But the house is empty," he said. But then he looked directly into the camera and begged Sean and Bella, Celeste, Catherine, he said, his voice full of emotion. "If you're out there, please come home. If someone has you, please bring them back. I need to see everyone again. This house isn't a home without everyone here. Please just come back." Chris said he thought someone took his family and wanted them to come home safely. This made people feel sorry for him, and the pressure on the police grew. They searched even harder and brought in more officers. They put posters with their pictures all over town, but they still couldn't find any clues. Because the media was talking about it so much, this weird disappearance became famous outside of the small town of Frederick, and everyone was talking about it. It became really popular, and lots of people hoped Sean and her daughters would be safe. The police wanted to solve the case quickly, so they decided to start by looking into Shanann's background. Sean Ann was born on January 10, 1984, in New Jersey, and later moved to North Carolina. She was really pretty, with big, bright eyes that were really warm. Her parents often said she was a gift from God. However, things didn't go as planned for this beautiful young woman. When she was 25, Sean Ann was told she had lupus, a disease with no cure. And then, just when she was at her lowest, she got into a serious car accident that same year, making it worse. That's when she met Chris online. They hit it off right away and became really good friends. She later said that Chris helped her through a really hard time in her life. He gave her hope and the strength to fight her illness, and slowly her health got better. So, on November 3, 2012, they got married. After that, they moved to Frederick, Colorado, and bought a house with 5 bedrooms. On December 17, 2013, their first daughter, Bella, was born. And then their second daughter, Celeste Catherine, was born on July 17, 2015. Being a mom made Sean Ann stronger, and her relationship with Chris seemed strong. She loved sharing pictures of her perfect family on social media. However, despite their seemingly happy home life, their finances were not good at all. They were having a hard time paying for things. And while their combined annual income was pretty good, $90,000, it wasn't enough to cover their expenses. They had a $3,000 mortgage and a $600 car payment each month, plus $70,000 in credit card debt, student loans, and medical bills. But then, in July 2014, someone sued them because they didn't pay their homeowners association dues. Because they owed so much money, Chris declared bankruptcy on June 5, 2015. At that point, they only had $3 and $6 left in their bank accounts. So despite their bad financial situation, they were determined that things would get better. But even with all their money problems, Shanann's love for Chris never changed. In a 2017 online post, she wrote, "I love you more than words can say, and God brought you to me when I was feeling really down and helped me. I love you more than words can say, and I can't imagine life without you." Then, on June 11, 2018, they got some good news. They were going to have another baby. Sean Ann was really happy and told Chris right away. They were happy to find out they were having a boy and decided to name him Nico. Meanwhile, as the police investigated, they found out that Sean Ann was a nice woman who loved her family a lot. Her friends said she was happy and loved her husband and kids a lot. It seemed unlikely that she would leave on her own with her daughters. So who took them? And how did they disappear and avoid all those security cameras? The police talked to Shanann's friends and family and asked if anything weird was going on with her. Everyone they talked to said the same thing. Sean Ann and Chris were having problems. Sean Ann told her friends, while crying sometimes, that her marriage wasn't going well. Her texts showed that she felt Chris wasn't interested in her or the kids anymore. She said maybe they weren't right for each other and that maybe they should break up. Shanann's mom, Sandra, also told the police that while Chris was a good husband and dad at first, he had changed. She said that when Sean Ann took the kids to North Carolina for a 5-week vacation on June 27, 2018, Chris didn't want to go and only went there 5 weeks later, around the end of July or early August. One night during that 5 weeks, Sean had really bad morning sickness and was throwing up all night, but Chris didn't care at all. Sandra thought that was weird because he'd always been nice and caring before. She even told the police that she thought Chris did something to her daughter and granddaughters. Coincidentally, the change in Chris seemed to coincide with Shanann's trip. During her time away, their communication dwindled and eventually they stopped talking altogether. Even after he joined them in North Carolina, the usual affection between them, the hugs, the kisses, vanished. They'd become strangers living under the same roof. Sean, deeply troubled by this shift, confided in her friends, expressing her heartbreak and her growing suspicion that Chris was seeing someone else. Her fears were confirmed when police, investigating Chris's phone records, discovered he'd been having an affair with a coworker, Nicole Kessinger. Chris had lied to Kessinger, telling her he was already divorced. The police also found out that around February 2018, Chris met a woman named Amanda on a dating app. When the police talked to Amanda, she said Chris was wild and aggressive in bed. The police thought he cheated many times during his marriage. It seemed like he didn't love his anymore. Meanwhile, an investigator who studied behavioral analysis was looking at the video of Chris's TV interview, and he saw some weird things. During the interview, Chris seemed nervous and was looking around nervously. He crossed his arms a lot, like he was trying to protect himself. And when he talked about his wife and daughters, he kept using the past tense, like he knew they were gone forever. Nicole, Shanann's good friend, also told the police 2 important things. First, when she said they should call the police, Chris tried to stop her. He didn't want to call the police. Second, when they watched the security camera footage together, Chris acted weird. He was usually calm, but he got really nervous and anxious when he saw himself putting his truck in the garage. He paced and crossed his arms and looked really nervous. Like the video showed a secret he didn't want anyone to know. This made the police really suspicious. The neighbor who gave them the security footage also said it was weird that Chris put his truck in the garage because he had never done that before. It wasn't like him at all. And on the morning Sean disappeared, before Nicole called the police, Chris was the only person anyone saw going into or out of the house. Did he do something bad? It was getting hard to ignore that possibility. Then, on August 15th, 3 days after Sean and the girls disappeared, the police brought Chris in for questioning. In the interrogation room, Chris sat with his legs crossed. He looked relaxed, calm, and confident. The detective said, "I want to talk to you about your marriage and you cheating on your wife. Tell me everything." Chris said, "I never cheated on anyone. She's trustworthy. And of course, if we were going to make a change to make our lives better, we'd tell each other." During the interrogation, Chris's answers were well-planned and perfect. He denied cheating on Sean and then said he never hurt her. If the police hadn't already found evidence that said he did, they might have believed him. The FBI agent who studied behavioral analysis was watching the interrogation video and saw something important. Whenever Chris talked about his missing family, he would touch his neck without thinking about it. Because of this, the agent thought maybe Chris strangled Sean, and later, during a lie detector test, Chris stayed calm. "Police, did you have anything to do with Sean and your kids disappearing?" Chris, "No." "Do you know where they are now?" "No." "Did you and Sean have a fight?" "No." His answers were firm, but the lie detector test showed something different. He got a really bad score, way worse than the score that means you're telling the truth. When he found out he failed the test, his act fell apart. He got really nervous and upset. He looked sad and defeated. Finally, he broke down and admitted to the terrible things he did. "Did you lose your temper and strangle her?" the police asked. "Yes," Chris said quietly. "I just lost it." "Oh my God," the detective said. "What about the children?" Through sobs, Chris said that after he said they should break up that morning, Sean was really upset. They argued, and as he walked downstairs, he heard the children crying and screaming. He ran back upstairs to the bedroom, and he said he saw Sean choking their daughters. He said this made him really mad, and he strangled his wife because he was so angry. Because the garage was connected to the house, he was able to put his truck inside, wrap his wife and children in a bedsheet, put them in his truck, and drive them to an oil site near one of the company's oil fields. He buried them there. That's why no one saw them leaving the house. His story was hard to believe. Would a loving mom who was pregnant really choke her two daughters like that? Seemed crazy. But no matter what really happened, Chris admitted to killing Sean, and the police found the oil site Chris had talked about. It was almost 60 miles from their house. Photos taken by a drone showed a rectangular area of dirt that looked different near some oil tanks, and something else, a bed sheet that looked like the one missing from the Watts home. The police showed Chris the pictures and asked him to show them where the bodies were. He marked 3 spots and said that Sean and their 2 daughters were buried there. They followed his directions and found Sean and buried in a grave, wrapped in a bed sheet. The girls' bodies were stuffed inside oil tanks and barely fit through the small openings. The medical examiner said they all died from not being able to breathe. Sean had marks on her neck and wounds on her hands from trying to protect herself. They also found a cut inside her mouth. 3-year-old Bella had a scrape on her left buttock, and they found some blonde hair inside one of the oil tanks. This showed that Chris put her inside. These details showed how terrible Chris was. Agent Tammy Lee, one of the main investigators, knew she was right when she saw the bodies. Chris's story was a lie. He killed them all. If he really did it because he was mad, why would he get rid of his daughters by putting their bodies in those oil tanks? It was terrible, and no loving father would do that. The district attorney charged Chris with killing 3 people, messing with a dead body, and killing a baby. On August 16, 2018, the first hearing in the Chris Watts murder case happened in Weld County, Colorado. It was a sad day in the courtroom. Shanann's dad gave a sad speech. He said his daughter was a woman full of love and life, and she was passionate about everything, especially her children, Bella and Celeste. Because the crime was so bad and Chris might be dangerous, the judge didn't let Chris pay bail. But even with all the evidence and what the family said, Chris said he was innocent on August 21, 2018. He kept telling his lies about Sean and hurting their children. Because they wanted him to confess, Shanann's family agreed not to kill him. For people were already dead, and they didn't want anyone else to die, even a killer. On November 6, 2018, Chris made a deal and admitted to killing his pregnant wife and 2 daughters so he wouldn't be killed. Addressing the gravity of the crime, the judge stated, "This is perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime that I have handled out of the thousands of cases I have seen." He condemned Chris's premeditated and callous actions, which had resulted in the loss of 4 lives, Sean and Bella, Celeste, and their unborn son, Nico. This was not a spontaneous act. This was not an accident, he said. His voice filled with this was a horrific planned act. Chris was sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 48 years for the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy and 36 years for 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. A total of 84 years added to his life sentences. While spared the death penalty, he would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. Shanann's dad, Frank Razusek, talked to Chris after the judge said what his sentence was. He was really sad and angry. Sean and Bella, Celeste, Nico, he said, his voice full of emotion. She was a great person. They brought joy to everyone around them. Only God knows what happened that night. You took them from me. You monster. You have to live with this every day of your life. You have nothing. My life is dark now. I'll miss them every day. God won't forgive you. He gave you so much. Why? Why did you take them from me? I trusted you to take care of them, not hurt them. And they trusted you too. You monster. You disgust me. Prison is too good for you. He couldn't hold back his emotions and cried out, I loved you like a son. Then may God have mercy on your soul. But I don't think you have one because I don't see it. He ended with a scary message. I hope you see that every day of your life. Chris never said why he did it, so no one knew why he did it. It seemed like he just wanted a new life with his new girlfriend and didn't want to deal with his wife and kids anymore. The case was over. But then a book called Letters from Christopher, The Tragic Confessions of the Watts Family Murders, came out in September 2019 with crazy new details. The author, Sherilyn Cadle, wrote to Chris and put his letters and confessions in a book telling the story of the terrible crime. In his letters, Chris said some crazy things that even the police didn't know. He showed that he planned it and was really cruel. He said in his letters that what really happened was much worse than anyone thought. On the morning of August 13th, before he talked to Sean and about breaking up, he went to his daughter's bedroom and tried to smother them with pillows. Luckily, both girls woke up. Later, when he was arguing with Sean and he strangled her. When his daughters woke up and asked where their mom was, Chris just said, "Mommy is sick." Then he put them in his truck and drove to the oil site. The two little girls didn't know their mom was dead and that they were going to die too. When they got to the empty place, Chris killed Celeste, his youngest daughter, while Bella, his 4-year-old. Bella cried and asked what he had done. Chris didn't listen to her and killed his oldest daughter too. Bella's last words were heartbreaking. "Daddy, no." In his letters, Chris also said he tried to poison Sean and before so she would lose the baby. He did all of this just to leave his family and start a new life with his girlfriend, Nicole Kessinger. This revelation showed that the investigators were right about why he did it. However, in today's world, where divorce is common, it's hard to understand why he did such terrible things. If your marriage is broken, why not just break up or get a divorce? The things people do can be really scary. It's hard to understand how Chris could be so cruel. Did he feel nothing when he killed his own children and watched them die? And does he hear their cries and his nightmares? These questions remain unanswered and they remind us how cruel people can be. Chris Watts is in prison for life and that's the right punishment. Now he has to spend his life thinking about what he did. It's hard to believe, but even in prison, Chris got many love letters from women saying they liked him. Some even sent pictures of themselves in bikinis. Some said he had a really kind face. Others said he was a good person deep down. And others said they were attracted to him. This is weird, but it's not unusual. Like we've seen in other cases like the Scott Peterson case and the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez case, lots of famous criminals get this kind of attention and some even get married in jail. The sad story of the Watts family murders has been in many movies and documentaries, including the Netflix true crime documentary, American Murder, The Family Next Door, which came out on September 30th, 2020. The movie uses real footage and home videos to show how the murders happened, showing the problems they had that caused this terrible tragedy. Story 4. Off the southern coast of South Korea, near the city of Yeosu, there's a beautiful island called Gumo-do. It's home to a lot of rare birds and has small villages where people are mostly fishermen. Gumo-do has a rich culture with local legends, folk songs, and traditional games, making it a great place for tourists. Because more and more people are visiting, the islanders have opened a lot of guest houses and restaurants for visitors who want a relaxing vacation. And that's where our story takes place, in one of these fishing villages. This story is about a couple who were both married before. The husband, 50-year-old Park Tae-woo, was an insurance agent, and his wife, 47-year-old Kim Soo-yeon, was a waitress. They lived in Yeosu City. In 2018, they went on a Gumo-do island, and something terrible happened. At 10:56 p.m. on Monday, December 31st, 2018, someone made a panicked call to the police. It was a woman screaming and crying. The operator tried to figure out where she was, but she sounded hysterical and didn't seem to hear what the operator was asking. The call lasted about 4 minutes, and the woman's voice got quieter and quieter until they could only hear the sound of water. Then the call ended. Who was this woman? What was she so scared of? The operator, realizing this was a serious situation, immediately got to work tracing the call. Using the phone signal, they quickly pinpointed the location to a pier on Gumo-do Island. A rescue team was dispatched right away, racing against the clock. When they arrived, the pier was swarming with onlookers. A man sat on the edge, sobbing uncontrollably. It was Park Tae-woo. He rushed towards the rescuers, practically clinging to them, his voice raspy with desperation. Park Tae-woo's wife, 47-year-old Kim Soo-yeon, was from a typical family in Yeosu City. She had a lot of brothers and sisters and dropped out of school to start working. She met her first husband through friends, and they had 2 kids together, a boy and a girl. After they got divorced, Kim Soo-yeon got to keep the children. She worked at a restaurant that sells bean sprout soup in Yeosu, and that's where she met Park Tae-woo. He was a single dad, 3 years older than her. They liked each other right away and started to fall in love. On December 6, 2018, Kim Soo-hyun's divorce was finalized. Just 4 days later, she and Park Tae-woo got married. They had a small wedding and started their lives together. It was a perfect fresh start, but less than a month later, tragedy struck. Kim Soo-hyun drowned in the ocean. On the pier, Mr. Park was completely heartbroken. He was telling everyone how sweet and caring his wife was, and how much he loved their family. He kept saying how hard they'd worked to build a life together, and now it was all gone. He kept saying how unfair it all was. The rescue workers tried to comfort him, but that they didn't have much hope. Everyone knew that there was an almost zero chance of surviving in that icy water. Park Tae-woo said they had just gotten married and were still in their honeymoon. That afternoon, New Year's Eve, his wife said, "Hey, let's drive to Gumodu Island to watch the first sunrise of the new year." So, they drove from the city center, stopping at Yeokyeon Pier and Wohak Pier before heading to the fishing village. They didn't get a room, thinking they would just sleep in the car at the pier and wait for sunrise. A little after 10 p.m., his wife fell asleep in the passenger seat. Mr. Park wasn't tired, so he went out to smoke and look at the tires. As he got to the rear passenger side tire, the car suddenly started rolling. He tried to grab the door handle but missed. It turned out that they'd parked on a small hill near a steep drop. Within seconds, the car was going to fall off the edge. Can you imagine? He ran as fast as he could to the passenger side, trying to wake up his wife and open the door, but it was locked. He banged on the window like crazy and yelled her name, but she didn't wake up. He watched in horror as the car, with his wife trapped inside, fell into the water. For a moment, Mr. Park froze in panic. He watched the car sink quickly, disappearing into the water. He screamed for his wife, hoping she would wake up and escape. He heard her screams for help from inside the sinking car. He jumped into the water, desperate to save her, but he couldn't swim, and it was so dark that he couldn't see anything. He tried really hard, but he had to give up and climb back onto the pier. He realized his phone was in the car, now sinking rapidly. He yelled for help, hoping someone would hear him, but it was past 10 p.m., and the pier was deserted. With no other options, he ran towards the village, desperate to find someone, anyone. He eventually stumbled upon a guest house and begged for help. The owner let him call 119 emergency services. By the time he returned to the pier, the car had completely vanished beneath the waves. His wife was gone. Realizing the horrific truth, Mr. Park collapsed on the pier, sobbing uncontrollably. Slowly, people started to arrive, hearing all the noise, but no one wanted to go in the water. They were confused and didn't know what to do, so they just waited for the rescue team. When they arrived, the rescue divers noticed some strange things. First, the railings on both sides of the pier were damaged, and one section was really bent like a car had hit it. A fisherman who worked at the pier said the railing wasn't damaged earlier that day. Also, they noticed something odd about Park Tae-woo. Even though he said he jumped into the water to save his wife, his clothes were completely dry. These two details led the rescue team to a disturbing theory. Maybe this wasn't an accident. Maybe Park Tae-woo had killed his wife. They called the police right away. After they got the call, the police got to the scene quickly. Park Tae-woo seemed a little surprised to see them, but calmed down quickly, saying he was happy to help with the investigation. He kept telling the same story, insisting his wife's death was a tragic accident. When they asked him about the damaged railing, he pretended he didn't know anything about it, and said maybe it was broken before they arrived. The police then went to the guest house where Park Tae-woo had made the 911 call. The owner told them that Mr. Park had seemed really calm, not at all like someone whose wife had just driven into the ocean. He'd just wandered around the guest house for a bit. If he hadn't asked to use the phone, the owner would have thought he was just a regular guest. What he said made the police even more suspicious. It seemed really strange for a husband to be so calm when his wife was in serious danger. Police didn't believe him. Knowing they didn't believe him, Park Tae-woo said he'd been looking around the guest house for anything that might help with the rescue. He insisted he was super worried, just not showing it on the outside. He said that in emergencies it was important to stay calm. Otherwise, who would save his wife? But what he said didn't get rid of the police's concerns. To figure out what happened, they got the security camera footage from the pier area. Unfortunately, the cameras didn't show the car falling into the water, and they didn't show Mr. Park jumping in after it. What they did show was Park Tae-woo walking slowly to the nearby guest house at 10:57 p.m., not looking worried at all. His clothes looked dry, so the police thought maybe he was trying to waste time so that the rescue services would arrive late. When the police showed him this, Park Tae-woo said he had never been to Jumioto before and didn't know the area. He said it was dark and he couldn't see the path clearly, which is why he was walking slowly. The investigation showed that Park Tae-woo, 50, worked as an insurance salesman. He had 3 daughters with his first wife, and they lived a pretty normal life. Over time, his wife started complaining that he couldn't give them a better life. She was mad that he didn't make much money. Money problems led to constant arguments, and the marriage ended. After the divorce, his 3 daughters lived with him. To make enough money to support his kids, he had a lot of different jobs, like being a waiter and a salesman. Anything he could find. In December 2012, he and a friend stole 52 million won, about $40,000 in Yosu City, and the police caught them. At the time, Park Tae-woo owed about 80 million won, about $60,000. He admitted to the crime, explaining that his daughters were in school, and he needed money for their school fees. He was desperate, so he stole the money. He was sent to jail for 2.5 years. After he got out of jail in 2014, he barely made enough money doing small jobs and driving a tour bus. In May 2018, he applied for a job as an insurance salesman, but didn't get it because of his criminal record. He didn't give up and applied to another company for a similar job and got it. He had a lot of training about insurance, payouts, and things like that. He also looked for clients and made it seem like he met them by chance so he could talk about their insurance needs. He got really good at the job and started making good money. In late September 2018, Park Tae-woo decided to go after Kim Soo-hyun. He'd seen her working at a restaurant he went to a lot. He planned a chance meeting and started a conversation about insurance with her. When he learned that she wasn't living with her husband anymore and was getting a divorce, he stayed in close contact with her. He did everything he could to get her to like him, giving her lots of attention, taking her on trips, and offering her good deals on insurance. She quickly fell in love with him. On October 26th, Park Tae-woo persuaded Kim Soo-hyun to buy 3 insurance policies. 2 of them would give her over $700,000 each if she died. On November 9th, he got her to buy dental insurance, and then on November 20th, another life insurance policy that would pay out $700,000. In love and hoping for a better future, Kim Soo-hyun signed every document he gave her. She had no idea about his bad plans. To make it seem like he had money, Park Tae-woo sold his old car and bought a newer used car, the same one that would later fall into the ocean. He also told stories about buying land on a beautiful island and promised to build a house where they could live when they retired. Kim Soo-hyun believed all his lies and married him just 4 days after her divorce was official. Between December 12th and 13th, Park Tae-woo got car insurance on his vehicle. He put the insurance in Kim Soo-hyun's name at first, then changed the who would get the money to himself and finally, and kind of suspiciously, switched it again to his younger brother. The police talked to Kim Soo-hyun's children about their new stepfather. Her eldest, her son, said he was a great guy, always nice and generous. He took him to nice restaurants and places to have fun. He said he really liked his stepfather and that his mom seemed much happier after getting married again. He also said that his mom had acted normal before the accident and didn't seem upset or anything. Kim Soo-hyun's younger daughter also had a positive impression of her stepfather. She'd initially worried that after remarrying, her mom would have less time and attention for her and her brother. But that hadn't been the case. She described him as thoughtful and caring, sometimes even more so than their own mother. From the children's perspective, Park Tae-woo appeared to be a model stepfather. However, investigators noted the extremely short duration of the marriage, concluding it was unlikely they'd truly know him after such a brief time. As the investigation continued, the police found something important. After the Park Tae-woo had changed the person who would get the money on all 6 of Kim Soo-hyun's life insurance policies to himself. If she died, he would get a huge amount of money, about $900,000. Most of the policies would pay if she died in an accident like a car accident. The police thought this was why Park Tae-woo did it. They thought he had carefully planned the whole accident. He wanted to get all that insurance money. As an insurance salesman, he knew a lot about insurance and how to get around the rules. After meeting Kim Soo-hyun, he saw a way to use her. He pretended to love her and tricked her into a fast romance and a quick marriage. Then, he secretly changed who would get the money on her life insurance policies. Once everything was ready, he tricked her into going to Jumyeodu Island to do his bad plan. The police also found out that Park Tae-woo wasn't rich. Supporting 3 daughters made it hard for him to pay for things, so the idea that he did it for the money seemed believable. The police talked to his daughters. All 3 said their dad was a good, honest man. They admitted he made a mistake in the past, but they said he only did it because of his situation, not because that's what he was really like. They said he'd been a good dad since the divorce, saving every penny to provide for them, always making sure they had what they needed. By the afternoon of the following day, they pulled the car out of the water. It was a silver 2008 Genesis sedan. The front windshield was totally broken, and there was a big dent in the rear bumper. It looked like it was hit really hard. The trunk was also open. They found Kim Soo-hyun's body in the passenger seat. They found 2 cell phones inside the car, one that belonged to each of them, but both were broken because of the water. The autopsy showed that Kim Soo-hyun had drowned. They thought she died around 11 p.m. on December 31st. With the car out of the water, the police quickly found things that didn't match Park Tae-woo's story. He said the car rolled into the water, so the broken windshield seemed normal, from the water pressure or hitting rocks. But the damage to the rear bumper didn't make sense. If the car went in front first, how did the back get smashed? And why was the trunk open? Also, there was another problem. The gear shift was in neutral. This was really weird. Why would Park Tae-woo leave the car in neutral on a pier, especially when he was going to stay there for hours? It would be easy for the car to roll unless that's what he wanted. The police questioned Park Tae-woo about these things that didn't make sense. He changed his story and said he'd parked really close to the slope at first. He thought it was the perfect spot to watch the sunrise. But his wife got nervous about being so close to the edge and asked him to move back a little. He said that while backing up, he accidentally hit the railing. And that's how the bumper got dented. After stopping the car, he said he always put the car in neutral, then got out to look at the damage to the railing. As soon as he stepped out, the car started rolling. He said the trunk probably popped open when the car fell into the water. His new story was full of problems and didn't match what he said before. He pretended he didn't know anything about the damaged railing, but now he admitted to hitting it himself. His story didn't make sense. It's important to remember that Park Tae-woo used to be a tour bus driver, so he was a good driver and knew about the dangers of leaving a car in neutral. It didn't seem likely that someone with his driving history would make such a basic mistake. When the police said this, Park Tae-woo said he never thought something like this could happen, and if he had, he would have for sure put the car in park. He said he wasn't thinking and had just gotten out to quickly check the tires, thinking it would be okay to leave it in neutral for a minute. He said it was all because of the wind and the slope of the pier that the car rolled, but what he said didn't stop the police from being suspicious. There was another weird thing. One of the rear windows was a little open, about 7 centimeters. If all the windows had been closed when the car went into the water, it wouldn't have sunk so quickly. Even a small open window would let water rush in and send the car to the bottom quickly. If Kim Soo-hyun had been feeling hot and wanted some air, she would have opened the passenger window next to her. But the car's passenger window was closed. It was a rear window that was open. This difference made the police suspicious. They thought maybe Park Tae-woo left the rear window open on purpose to make the car sink faster. When the police told him this, Park Tae-woo didn't say anything. He said he didn't do it and said his wife asked him to open the back window. He said at first she opened the passenger window because she was hot, but then it got windy, so she closed it and asked him to open the back window to get some air. Even though he said he didn't do it, it seemed like Kim Soo-hyun's death wasn't an accident. Park Tae-woo had a good reason to do it, and he acted really suspiciously. The police arrested him because they thought he killed her. The investigation showed what happened. On the night of the accident, Park Tae-woo parked on the pier. Pretending that they needed fresh air, he opened a rear window. After that, he had sex with Kim Soo-hyun in the car. Then, saying they needed more privacy, he said they should go to a guest house. As he backed up the car, he crashed it into the railing on purpose. Then, pretending to check the damage, he left the car in neutral without putting on the parking brake. He got out, leaving Kim Soo-hyun alone in the car, and went to look at the rear bumper. The car was parked on a slope, and it started to roll backward towards the water, and Kim Soo-hyun died. A year later, they had a trial at the Suncheon branch of the Gwangju District Court. The prosecution said that Park Tae-woo didn't have much money and had to support his kids after his divorce, so he planned everything. They said he killed Kim Soo-hyun and made it look like an accident to get the insurance money. They explained what happened. On December 31, 2018, Park Tae-woo tricked his wife into going to the pier on Jumyo-do Island to watch the sunrise. Then he crashed the car into the railing while backing up, left the car in neutral, and got out to look at the damage. Then, they said he pushed the car into the water with his wife inside. The defense said that even though Park Tae-woo didn't have much money, he wouldn't kill someone for it. They said there was no proof that he pushed the car, and said maybe it rolled because of something else like a strong gust of wind. The prosecution repeated that Park Tae-woo's money problems were a good reason for him to do it, and what he did, especially leaving the car in neutral when he was a good driver, meant he planned it. They said that the open rear window in the middle of winter was really suspicious. They found out something new. Park Tae-woo had been at the pier on December 24th, a week before the accident, which made them even more suspicious. They were sure the car couldn't have rolled into the water by itself. After hearing everything and looking at the evidence, the court made its decision. Park Tae-woo was found guilty of killing his wife and was sentenced to life in prison. He appealed right away and took his case to the Gwangju High Court. At the appeal hearing, Park Tae-woo said he was innocent. He said he loved his wife and would never hurt her, and definitely wouldn't kill her for insurance money. He said he had money problems but said he wouldn't do something so crazy. He said there were other reasons why the car rolled into the water and that it couldn't be proven for sure that he pushed it. His lawyers showed the results of a test the police did at the pier. They tested how easily a car in neutral could roll down the slope. 3 things happened. 1. On level ground, the car wouldn't roll unless it was pushed. 2. On a slope, the car would roll if the parking brake wasn't on. 3. If the car started on level ground, it could roll if the passenger moved around a lot. But the test showed that the passenger had to move many times to make it move. But the defense pointed out a big problem with the test. It didn't always roll at the same point. The appellate judge argued that Park Tae-woo didn't have a strong enough financial motive to murder Kim Soo-hyun, and that there were plausible alternative explanations for the car rolling into the sea. They couldn't definitively say Park Tae-woo pushed it. The appellate court overturned the murder conviction, finding him guilty of the lesser charge of involuntary manslaughter. Citing the Act on Special Cases concerning the settlement of traffic accidents, they reduced his sentence from life to just 3 years. Park Tae-woo, still maintaining his innocence, appealed again, this time to the Supreme Court of Korea. Then something crazy happened. The Supreme Court said he wasn't guilty of accidentally killing her, and said he was completely innocent. The judge said that even though they could use evidence that didn't directly prove he did it to convict him, they had to be completely sure he was guilty. They said that Park Tae-woo didn't want to go on the trip to Gummo-do, that it seemed like having sex in the car was the victim's idea, and that Park Tae-woo said he didn't feel good and wanted to go to a guest house before the accident. They said these things made it seem like he didn't plan it. They said the prosecution didn't have enough evidence to prove for sure that he did it, so maybe he didn't do it. With no other evidence, the court said he was innocent. Now that he was free, Park Tae-woo asked for the money from the insurance company right away, but they didn't want to pay. They said he probably planned Kim Soo-hyun's death and that it wasn't an accident. So Park Tae-woo took them to court. The case went to court in Seoul on December 12, 2022. The insurance company said that even though Park Tae-woo was innocent, what he did, like changing who would get the money on the life insurance policies right before his wife died, and because the accident seemed strange, they needed to investigate more before they could give him the money. Park Tae-woo said the insurance company didn't want to pay him his money. He said that because he was innocent of killing his wife, they had to give him the money. The court agreed with the insurance company at first, but Park Tae-woo appealed. The higher court said the first court was wrong and told the insurance company to pay Park Tae-woo all the money. A year later, Park Tae-woo got all the money, about $900,000. Some people think he planned everything from the beginning, planning his wife's death and using the legal system to get the insurance money. They say that because he used to be an insurance salesman, he used that knowledge to find ways to get around the rules and get away with killing his wife. Other people think he was really innocent and couldn't have made up such a complicated plan. They think it was all just an accident and that he just happened to be the only one who would get the money. They think the things people said about him didn't prove anything and that it was fair that he was innocent. This is what the South Korean justice system decided. Even now, people still don't agree. Story 5. Hermes bags are a luxury item for the super rich, but they were stolen in a crazy robbery. At noon on June 30th, 2023, a delivery truck left a warehouse in Saint-Martin, France. It was going to the northern city of Temple, but soon after leaving the warehouse, a black van with flashing red and blue lights that looked like a police car showed up and made the truck pull over. 3 guys got out of the van. One of them was wearing a bulletproof vest that said police and pulled out a handgun. What happened next? The driver wanted to cooperate, but the 3 men got inside the truck, pulled him out, put a bag over his head, and tied his hands behind his back. They threw him in the back of their van and told him to keep his head down and be quiet. They drove for about half an hour and then left him on the side of the road in his underwear. It was an empty parking lot and he was scared and confused. He walked for over 10 minutes to a nearby fire station to report the robbery. Over the past 10 years, things have gotten worse in France, especially in Paris. There's a lot of theft and robberies are more and more common. Usually, the French police just take a report so people can file insurance claims, but this case made them suspicious. The thieves stole a huge amount of stuff, about $1.6 million, and what they stole was really interesting. The truck had 100 Hermes handbags, including a super rare black and gold limited edition and over 50 really popular platinum editions. There were also 372 Louis Vuitton handbags, 3 Rolex watches, a Patek Philippe, other expensive stuff from brands like Prada and Gucci, and hundreds of bottles of designer perfumes and cosmetics. Luxury experts thought something was fishy. The platinum Hermes bags alone were worth almost as much as everything else combined. Were all the other luxury goods just a bonus? And the police suspected that maybe the amount they claimed was stolen was bigger than it really was. The difference in value was so obvious that the courier company was either trying to scam the insurance company or something weird was going on. And here's another thing. The delivery truck didn't have any logos or any signs that said which company it was, and the driver said he didn't even know what he was transporting. But the robbers found this specific truck and did the robbery quickly and easily. The insurance company was skeptical and didn't pay them right away. Instead, they started investigating and hired some detectives to see if this was all an insurance scam. News of the heist shocked the Parisian Chinese community. Most of the stolen stuff belonged to people who buy things for other people in China. Now, with the handbags gone and the insurance company investigating, these people had a big problem. Even if they got their money back from the insurance company, it could take a long time. And because these items were so rare and expensive, they could lose a lot of money. And they could even go bankrupt. Some articles said that the shipping company was Penguin Shipping, a company that works with Hermes. So people thought that someone stole a shipment of Hermes bags. But there was no information about this on the Hermes or Penguin Shipping websites. It turned out that Penguin Shipping was a Chinese-owned international logistics company that specialized in packaging, shipping, warehousing, and customs clearance. And they were really good at getting things through customs. Later, some articles said that Penguin Shipping should pay them back because the stolen stuff included items from a lot of smaller shipping companies that used Penguin's help with customs. And now all their stuff was gone. Almost a week later, Penguin Shipping said that because the insurance company hadn't paid them back yet, they would give them back 10% of their money if the clients could prove they bought the stuff. The 10% offer was insulting, and making clients prove how much their stuff was worth made things even worse. This made people mad. and they went online to complain about Penguin Shipping and said they wanted all their money back. Among those affected, one user, nicknamed Miss Kong, identified herself as a die-hard Hermes collector. She claimed to have lost a highly valuable, rare leather handbag in the heist. However, she stated that she knew the owner of Penguin Shipping personally and believed he wasn't involved in staging the robbery. She expressed confidence that the French police and the insurance company would quickly resolve the case. Over the next few months, Miss Kong regularly posted updates online about the investigation and the insurance claim, effectively becoming the spokesperson for the affected Tegu agents. Her apparent calm reassured the others. If she wasn't worried, they reasoned, they shouldn't be either, especially since she seemed to have suffered the biggest loss. On the investigative front, the insurance company's detectives were proving far more effective than the French police. Using highway surveillance footage, they identified the black van used in the heist. They also found a witness near the parking lot, where the driver had been abandoned. Piecing together the evidence, they managed to partially reconstruct the van's license plate, tracing it back to Bobigny, a northeastern suburb of Paris. Despite having a population of just over 50,000, Bobigny had the second highest crime rate in France and was notorious for being a hub for stolen goods. When investigators tracked down the stolen truck, it was completely empty. All the luxury goods were gone. 4 suspects were apprehended, 3 identified by the driver as the robbers and a 4th identified as the getaway driver. The suspects, aged between 24 and 36, all had prior records for theft and robbery. During interrogation, they confessed that this heist was just another day at the office for them. They admitted to a string of similar robberies over the past year, targeting various delivery trucks and stealing everything from cigarettes to electronics. Because the value and volume of those previous heists weren't nearly as significant as this one, they'd simply let the insurance companies handle the payouts. But one thing in their confession made the investigators curious. They said someone had hidden a GPS tracker in the shipment. This let them find exactly where the truck was and rob it easily. The police report didn't say what kind of tracker it was, but they did say where they got the information. From a Chinese guy named Zhang Yi. But here's the interesting part about Zhang Yi's background. He came to France 10 years ago with a tourist visa and stayed longer than he was allowed, making him an illegal immigrant. During his time there, he met a Chinese woman named Kong Jingwen, and they fell in love quickly. They started a small business together and made their first money by buying expensive things for clients in China and later started selling used luxury handbags. Since neither of them was allowed to live there legally, they found a way to get around the rules by getting residency by investing money in Andorra, a small country between France and Spain. They only needed to spend a few days in Andorra each year to keep their visas so they could go back to France whenever they wanted. In the Chinese community, Zhang Yi made everyone think he was a successful businessman, while Kong Jingwen became famous on social media with 50,000 followers. She often posted pictures of fancy vacations, expensive meals, and luxury goods. She made everyone think she was beautiful, rich, and influential. By now, you can probably guess that Kong Jingwen was actually Paris Miss Kong, the person who said she knew everything about Hermes and was demanding money from Penguin Shipping. When people found out about Zhang Yi and Kong Jingwen's connection, the Chinese community was shocked. They also learned that Kong Jingwen had been to the Penguin Shipping warehouse just one day before the robbery, saying she had a business meeting with the warehouse manager. So who put the GPS tracker in the shipment to tell the robbers where the truck was? The answer seemed pretty clear. By planning the robbery of their own goods, they could get back the handbags to sell again and also get money from insurance, making twice as much profit in what seemed like a never-ending cycle of illegal money. While this kind of insurance scam in the Chinese community, trying to cheat the insurance company, wasn't completely new, something much worse came out during the robbers' trial. One of them made a deal to get a shorter sentence by telling on the gang. He revealed they had done other crimes too, including killing a Chinese exchange student earlier that year. This killing happened more than a month before the robbery of luxury goods. It took place on May 17, 2023, in a nice apartment building with 5 floors on Avenue du Président Pompidou in Paris' 16th district. The case started when someone living in the building told their landlord about water leaking from their ceiling. In the afternoon of May 16th, the landlord went to check it out with a handyman. They knocked many times on the door of the apartment on the second floor, but nobody answered. When they used a special key to open the door, they found something terrible. A young man was lying on the living room sofa, with his hands tied behind his back and tape wrapped tightly around his head and face. His face had turned purple and he wasn't breathing. The police came quickly and found out the dead person was Xiaotong Lin, a 25-year-old student from China. The landlord said Lin had started renting the apartment 3 months earlier and signed up to stay for 6 months. He always paid his rent when he was supposed to. Because he didn't speak much French, he didn't talk much with other people. His neighbors said he kept to himself, and the only people they saw him talking to were delivery drivers. He seemed to order a lot of food to be delivered. Someone saw Lin taking out his trash on the evening of May 15th. So the police think he died sometime between that evening and early the next morning. When doctors examined his body, they found more than 12 bruises, marks on his neck where something had been wrapped around it, and learned that he died because liquid got into his breathing passages and lungs. The investigators think someone hit him many times and punched him so hard his nose broke. They think the attacker was worried Lin would scream, so they wrapped tape around his mouth and nose. When Lin fell back on the sofa, blood from his broken nose went down into his throat and lungs. Because of the tape, he couldn't cough or throw up the blood, so he slowly and painfully drowned in it. The police talked to several people who knew Lin. They all described him as introverted and quiet, someone who never argued and had no conflicts with anyone. However, they particularly emphasized that Lin came from a very wealthy family. He was a rich young master who never lacked money and was sent abroad by his family. He initially planned to learn French, but after studying at a low-quality language school for 1 or 2 months, he dropped out and stayed home playing games, living a deteriorating lifestyle with no distinction between day and night. There were no signs that someone broke into the apartment, but inside, everything was a mess. Someone had pulled out all the clothes from the closet and books from the shelves, leaving stuff scattered everywhere. The police thought this might be a robbery that turned into murder, and they especially looked at the possibility that it was either someone Lin knew or someone pretending to be a delivery person. But something really confused the investigators. Right by the front door, they found an expensive pair of limited edition sneakers and a Louis Vuitton umbrella. In the room, they also found a Hermes wallet with 7,500 euros in cash, about $8,200, and 20 grams of illegal drugs. The investigators thought this was strange because if someone came to rob the place, why would they leave all these valuable things behind? Moreover, the nature of Lin's injuries pointed to something more sinister than a simple robbery. The extensive bruising suggested torture. It appeared that the attack was premeditated, aimed at extracting something more valuable than the cash and luxury goods readily available. The investigation stalled due to the lack of security cameras near the apartment and the absence of any identifying evidence left behind by the perpetrator. However, thanks to the cooperating witness in the truck heist case, the police were able to gather crucial information, eventually leading them to 2 suspects, both members of the same criminal gang, Nicholas and Sofiane. According to their confessions, Nicholas worked as a UPS delivery driver, his route covering the 16th arrondissement where Lin lived. As an avid online shopper and frequent user of food delivery services, Lin often encountered Nicholas. For convenience and perhaps out of trust, Lin had given Nicholas the access code to his apartment building. During one delivery, Nicholas noticed a plethora of luxury goods, including numerous Hermes handbags strewn across Lin's bed. Seeing this goldmine, Nicholas quickly contacted his close friend Sofiane, who'd recently been released from prison after serving a 6-year sentence. Desperate for cash, Sofiane readily agreed to Nicholas's plan. Initially, they planned a simple burglary. Sofiane staked out Lin's apartment, waiting for him to leave, but Lin rarely ventured out. This forced them to adopt a more audacious approach. On the evening of the 15th, Sofiane, wearing Nicholas's uniform and carrying an empty delivery box, used the access code to enter Lin's apartment building. When Lin opened the door, Sofiane overpowered him, not only stealing the valuables but also brutally beating Lin and forcing him to reveal his bank card PIN. In his frenzy, Sofiane struck Lin, knocking him unconscious. Panicked, he fled the scene. Tragically, Lin never regained consciousness. Police later found a significant amount of cash and several luxury leather goods in Sofian's apartment, some of which were identified as belonging to Lin. Based on these confessions and recovered items, both men were initially charged with robbery, kidnapping, and murder, although the murder charge was later reduced to manslaughter. You've probably realized by now that the murder of Lin and the luxury truck heist were seemingly unrelated crimes, separated by time, location, and perpetrators. It was simply a stroke of luck for the French police, thanks to a witness eager to reduce his sentence, that these two cases became intertwined. So how do Kong Jingwen and Zhang Yi fit into all of this? While Lin's family was wealthy, he supplemented his allowance by working as a daigou agent, buying luxury handbags for clients in China. However, compared to Kong Jingwen, who billed herself as the top Hermes agent in France, Lin was a small-time player, unable to secure inventory directly from Hermes or authorized distributors. He relied on online orders, purchasing bags from other daigou agents at a markup and shipping them to his clients. While established agents typically made around 10% commission, Lin, as a reseller, only pocketed about 3%. But given the exorbitant price of Hermes bags, even this slim margin generated enough income to support his gaming habit and food delivery lifestyle. Shortly before his death, Lin posted online, bragging about landing a big client, someone who placed a large order for 4 handbags, including a pricey crocodile skin edition. Just 4 days after sending a message confirming the purchase of the bags, he was found dead in his apartment. A screenshot of a subsequent text message exchange revealed Kong Jingwen expressing her condolences to Lin's contacts after his death, even saying that they would be friends in their next life. While there's no direct evidence linking Kong Jingwen to the 4 Hermes bags Lin had sold, rumors within the Chinese luxury goods community suggested that she was the only one with access to such rare and sought-after items in that quantity. This led many to connect the dots when Kong Jingwen's boyfriend, Zhang Yi, was implicated in the truck heist, with its hallmarks of an inside job designed to defraud the insurance company. The theory was that Zhang Yi had hired the robbers to steal back the Hermes bags he'd sold to Lin, allowing him to resell them again. Some even speculated that the big client who placed the order with Lin was a fake account created by Kong Jingwen as part of the scam. They believed that while the robbery was planned, the murder was unintentional, a tragic consequence of excessive force used by the robbers. This theory also explained why Lin had been beaten. The robbers were likely trying to extract information about the location of the handbags. It seemed plausible that whoever hired them had instructed them to retrieve those specific 4 bags, and they'd likely been promised a significant cut enough to make them grab the bags and run, leaving other valuables untouched. However, no concrete evidence ever emerged directly implicating Kong Jingwen or Zhang Yi in Lin's murder. The police concluded that Nicholas and Sofian were solely responsible for the robbery and Lin's death, with no mention of any other individuals involved. The online speculation about Kong Jingwen and Zhang Yi's involvement remained just that, speculation. While Kong Jingwen faced no consequences for Lin's death, Zhang Yi was convicted in the truck heist case, sentenced to 5 years in prison with 2 years suspended. Kong Jingwen walked away scot-free. In fact, even on the eve of Zhang Yi's sentencing, Kong Jingwen was still nonchalantly selling handbags online, even brazenly confronting smaller daigou agents demanding compensation. She insisted they weren't married, and told them to take their demands to Zhang Yi in prison. Her callous disregard for the victims of the heist infuriated the daigou community. Articles denouncing Kong Jingwen flooded social media, and even the entire daigou industry came under scrutiny. From luxury goods and jewelry to baby formula, toothpaste, and diapers, daigou agents worldwide had carved out a significant share of the retail market, capitalizing on the demand for foreign products often perceived as superior to domestic alternatives. However, the rise of e-commerce and streamlined import/export processes had dealt a blow to the daigou trade, especially during the pandemic, when major brands embraced global shipping, often offering tax-free options to customers in China. This forced many smaller, budget-focused daigou agents out of business. However, high-end daigou agents like Kong Jingwen were less affected. First, she specialized in luxury handbags with hefty price tags and even heftier commissions. One sale could keep you going for years kind of commissions. Second, Hermes bags, due to the brand's exclusive sales practices, were practically unattainable without a Daigou agent. These agents cultivated extensive networks of contacts at Hermes stores across multiple cities and even countries. When new stock or limited editions arrived, these bags were often intercepted and purchased before they even hit the shelves. And this brings us back to the puzzlingly low value of the stolen goods in the truck heist. The answer? A large portion of the merchandise was likely counterfeit, lacking valid invoices or proof of purchase. So, when it came time for the insurance valuation, the actual figure was much lower than initially claimed. Even Kong Jingwen, a supposedly reputable Hermes Daigou agent, might have been dealing in both authentic and counterfeit goods. With the origin of these goods often obscured, invoices, dust bags, packaging, everything could be easily replicated for pennies on the dollar, creating a convincing illusion of authenticity. A counterfeit handbag costing a few $100s to produce could be sold for thousands. Imagine the profit margin, enough to buy a new car every month. That's why the declared value of the stolen goods didn't add up. The truck was likely filled with knockoffs being shipped back to China. Even the inflated figure of 1.5 million euros seems excessive. The actual value was probably a fraction of that. The profit margin on counterfeit luxury goods could be as high as 800%. Suddenly, Lin's death starts to make a lot more sense. It's a chilling reminder of the dark side of consumerism. When a commodity designed to serve us begins to control us, to consume us, leading even to violence and loss of life. As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.